What's on your radar, Briahna?
Well, yesterday, as the story of a shooting event on the New York subway system broke, we at Rising wondered how quickly the crisis would go from a generalized tragedy into a politicized event. As it turns out, we didn't need to wait long. New York Mayor Eric Adams characterized the shooting event, which left at least 26 people injured and thankfully no fatalities, as part and parcel of a, quote, cult of death that has taken hold in this nation, a cult that allows innocents to be sacrificed on a daily basis. He vowed to, quote, continue to dam the rivers that feed the sea of violence. How? Well, by doubling the number of police officers traditionally patrolling the system. But as many criminal justice reform advocates have pointed out, increasing the police force has not resulted in lower crime rates. In fact, in an interview conducted yesterday by Dana Bash on CNN, Adams seemed to struggle to explain why, despite branding himself as a former cop, tough-on-crime mayor who had the unique ability to address subway violence, transit crimes are up.
I'm sure there are people in New York who say, wait a minute, I voted for a former cop to try to stop this, and it seems to be getting worse. What's your message to them?
New Yorkers know every day I wake up to protect the city, and they have trust in me as their mayor, and I have trust in the professionals that are carrying out the job of ensuring that our city is safe. And they're doing that every day. They're putting their lives on the line to remove dangerous people off our streets and dangerous weapons off our streets. And we know we're going to get crime under control. And the problems we're facing is a problem that is hitting our entire nation right now. And that is why this is a national response. We need a national response to this issue. We're going to do our job every day. As I indicated, 1,800 guns. Think about that in New York City. That's when you think about only 3.5 months removing 1,800 guns. We're going to continue to do our job, but there is some assistance that's going to be needed in our city, such as empowering ATF, bring in the ATF leader, as the president announced yesterday, making ghost guns illegal. There's so many things that we could do to assist the cities across America, particularly New York City, to make sure that we're a safe place for our residents.
Now, if you think you missed an answer to Bash's question about why Adams has not managed to bring crime down in New York, you're not alone. That wasn't an answer, just vibes. Nothing Adams said in that response has any bearing on yesterday's crime. Nominating a new director of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms has little to no bearing on New York's subway crime rates. And there's no evidence at this time that a ghost gun, which is a gun with filed off serial numbers, was used in the attack. Nothing he said there. Nothing addresses Dana's question about why New York's chief cop has overseen a rise in transit crimes, a jump of nearly 73%, despite a new anti-transit crime initiative, increased police funding last year, and calls for an even larger police budget by Eric Adams. But criminal justice advocates have a more satisfying explanation. More cops in subways may mean more turnstile jumpers in Rikers prison, but there is no correlation between increased police spending and increased public safety. According to reporting by Cleo Chang in New York Magazine, quote, the result of Eric Adams flooding the subway with cops to crack down on violent crime is 350 fare evasion arrests, 17,000 summons for misdemeanor crimes, and, of course, a mass shooting and bombing plan, an actual violent crime that cops did nothing to prevent. New York public defender and criminal justice commentator Olayemi Olurin, who we spoke to this morning about the shooting response, noted that Eric Adams is already using the Brooklyn subway shooting to call for more cops in the subways when he should be explaining to us why none of the multiple police officers that were in the station were able to prevent the incident, stop the shooter, or even get a proper description. Other New Yorkers offered pictures of what the New York police presence often looks like. Adults on their phones, standing around, collecting salaries while doing little, if anything, to catch people who have committed acts of violence, and nothing at all to address the underlying causes of crime. This is why it's hard to get away from defund as a political project. Every time there is an incident like this, there are calls to fund the police more, despite there being no relationship between increased funding and lower crime. The 2020 police budget in New York was already $11 billion, or 10% of the budget, with the largest share of that being spent on street patrol. Only two other city agencies, the Department of Education and the Department of Social Services, cost more. And police funding would outstrip DSS, but for $4.4 billion in Medicaid payments issued by that agency. And other cities have even more disproportionate funding of police as compared to social services. A full 1/3 of LA's budget goes to the police force. Oakland PD receives nearly half of the city's discretionary spending, more than every other expenditure, including human services, parks and recreation, and transportation combined. And 39% of Chicago's 2017 budget went to police. Even the most ardent lover of police might question these funding priorities. At this point, the conversation shouldn't be about whether or not you support the defund movement in the abstract. It should be whether these agencies should be held accountable for failing to use public funds to fulfill their fundamental mission, to keep us safe. The answer, obviously, is that it's failing in that mission. So why do we keep throwing money at this problem, hoping for a different result? Lawyer and author of Becoming Abolitionist, Derek Purnell, opined yesterday on why police are the only profession who do their jobs badly and get more funding and legitimacy. It's a good question. Police are being put to an impossible task, to be the backstop for a crumbling social safety net and economic system that has become a breeding ground for antisocial behavior. The answer isn't to throw more officers at the problem, putting them in situations for which they are not trained and in which they are not supported. The answer is to fund programs that have a demonstrated effect on lowering crime. 3 out of every 5 state prisoners and sentenced jail inmates have a substance abuse problem. Half of state and federal prisoners and 2/3 of jail inmates are in serious psychological distress or have a history of mental illness. Now, we don't know much about the perpetrator of yesterday's shooting, but to the extent that it's already being used as a justification to increase police funding, I feel comfortable saying this. If you really care about lowering crime, we could start by offering health care rather than throwing even more money at the police. Now, I know this is a little spicy, a little controversial, and there are a lot of people who feel very strongly about the defund movement. But what I just want to say is that regardless of how you feel about the valence of the movement or the politics behind the movement, it's really hard to me to argue with the idea that a moment like this shouldn't justify even more funding for programs that don't seem to be working. As a libertarian, I feel like you're going to be on this bandwagon.
Yeah, no, this is going to be an agreeable couple of radars today. It never makes sense. Look, this kind of thing, this horrible tragedy, but this is the hardest kind of thing to prevent. Something that is, look, mass shootings are actually pretty rare. They get a lot of media coverage. They suck us into like weeks-long coverage, especially school shootings, that kind of thing. But they're the equivalent of like lightning strikes. How do you prevent them? It's very hard to change public policy at the margins, right? We have a gun problem, we have a violence problem, we have all those things, but this kind of incident is actually not representative of the kind of violence problem we have. So even though everyone wants answers, what can be done about this? The answer is, well, frankly, nothing. Very little, probably. So I agree with you. And in general, with the kind of, defund stuff, look, I think having more police roaming the streets would probably reduce crime if we hired a bunch more cops to do it.
But we see
But they're not going to do it, so it's not worth you saw those pictures of what the police do on the subway.
Indeed.
They don't remove more violent or mentally ill people. They just arrest more people for fare evasion, which is not the problem we're actually concerned about.
Exactly.
So having a more robust police presence and investing more money into these is in some sense just investing more money in government services and government employees, which as a libertarian, I know does not yield these wonderful, beautiful results we would like them to yield.
And I'd say let's just shift it to a different agency that does have those kind of demonstrated results, but that's the subject for another Rising segment.
Fair enough. Well, we've got our Rising panel coming up next. Stay with us.